Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Royce. I am your runner, and today I'm going to talk FPS, Joules, Joule Creep, and overall how to chrono your Airsoft replica. And my guest on the show is Phil Walters. And Phil, why don't you introduce ourselves and tell you a little about you and your Airsoft experiences?
All right, I am Phil, as Royce introduced me. I've been playing quite a few years now. I was the lead tech for Kiowa, and I'm still the tech for Valor Airsoft. I'm also a warranty tech for Balkan. Um, and yeah, I have quite a bit of experience with building guns, anything from simple AEGs up to HPA builds and full on custom builds for people.
Okay, awesome. So one of the reasons that I'm trying to get things shared on Facebook and whatnot. So give me just a sec here. One of the things that really made me want to do this as a topic is that differently each of them shoots when it comes to FPS, maintaining that kinetic energy. And my whole goal of this was to try and change some people's minds and to just try to tell people, the much better way out there to chrono than just using, that old measurement system of FPS for chronoing. So, that being said, I think we all know what FPS is. It's feet per second. It's when the BB leaves the barrel of your gun. This is how that's how fast the BB is traveling. You know what I mean? And when the BB is when you put a heavier weight BB into your gun, kinetic energy is going to change. And so feet per second doesn't really give you an accurate description of what the other guy or the guy on the end of your gun is going to feel. So what are well, just tell me, like, what are some of your feelings just going to the old days and chronoing with like FPS? I think it was good. Do you think it's still good, can still be good, should still be used? What do you think?
Um, well, back in the old days, I guess you could say, the heavier weights were really unheard of. Everybody was using the same 0.20 gram BB. Maybe a 2.5 or a 2.8, which in the old system, by some of the older model AEGs and even some of the newer stuff that's coming out. It used to be that people didn't care about the heavier weight BB because most of your guns out there could not. The weight difference would actually slow them down, and it would be more of a disadvantage to use a weight. Where now, technology is starting to catch up, systems are starting to catch up. Where, for example, I've got an HPA sniper rifle. A few years ago, that would be unheard of. Your spring sniper rifles, those had a higher FPS limit with a minimum engagement. Well, the FPS limit, even in some places, has dropped significantly. You 600 FPS with a 2.0,
Jesus.
and people were they would spend like 40, $50 for 1,000 just to get the better range. Um, where now modern systems are catching up. You got air volumes, better air seals, even heavier weights are more readily available to where you can really hurt somebody by going. For example, I had a local field. Their max was 575 FPS. They looked at me really funny when I didn't chrono to their max. I only went to like 525. Brought it home to my local field or to Kiowa when I got back from that field. I did a quick chrono check. I run 4.5s out of that gun. They chronoed me with a 2.0. I was shooting 4.8 joules. Field standards are usually 2.8 for sniper rifles.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, like, FPS just with all the different systems out there and all the different BB weights, it just doesn't seem like it's that accurate of a measurement system anymore. One of the things that I really think that fields in general should get away with is chrono with FPS. They need to get away from chronoing with FPS. And if I had to pick another thing, I would say chronoing with lightweight BBs, because for those of you who don't know, a joule, Joule, or joules, a joule is the amount of kinetic energy that transfers from one object to another. So like when this fist touched this hand, the way that we would measure that scientifically is through joules. That's the measuring tape that we would use to, figure out how hard my fist hit the palm of my hand. And same goes with airsoft BBs. Now, what it will do, the way you calculate a joule is you take the feet per second or the velocity, and you take the mass or the weight of that BB, and you combine those two in a mathematical chamber. So, for instance, you have an AEG, which is more of a spring-powered piston compression type system, which in an AEG, as that piston is flying forward, it is simultaneously building pressure and releasing pressure to get your BB down the barrel. In an HPA, all of that pressure is already there, and all you're doing is opening a door, and all of that pressure is hitting that BB at once. And so what that's going to do is that's going to have a huge effect on the amount of kinetic energy that that thing is going to retain. And what it also tends to do is, because all of that air pressure exists, when you start stepping into higher weight BBs, that air pressure is still going to be moving that BB. For instance, the amount of F isn't going to be 1-to-1 with an AEG. Like an AEG, yes, you're going to lose some FPS just because of the system and how that compression and release all works. With an HPA, release all works. With an HPA, you're not going to lose that FPS. And so your joule increase isn't going to be the same ratio that it would be with an AEG, just because of the system. And I think most fields don't realize this. And I think it's kind of cheating a lot of the players out there from really having a good time on the field, just because of the purchasing decision that they decided to make.
Right. That can go both ways. I know most people won't be familiar, but for example, my Lancer, my ARC, that was the demo child for what we did at Valor with our custom builds. Concept of that build was kind of like, when I explain other techs or talking to people about it, it's kind of completely backward from what most people would really think. Going to your, trapdoor instant air release. So what I did with that gun is I built all the parts really lightweight and really fast to get that quicker acceleration. And that gun was one of the few AEGs that I know of that actually would creep like an HPA gun. And it all comes down to that amount of how quickly does it build pressure, how much air it's pushing out. And I think you and I had even spoke a couple of times out of field. You still have the acceleration of the piston that's got to compress the air, and then that comes down to how your BB leaves, and that's actually where, like, the M ratings for springs, it actually comes down to meter per second, which is what everybody else in the world uses except for the United States, really. So you get something like an M90 spring. Well, that theoretically would push a BB at 90 meters
per second, depending on air seal and a couple other things.
Right.
Yeah.
So really all the springs do anymore is how quickly it accelerates the piston and your barrel length. I mean, that's all it comes down to. So, like, in my Lancer, for example, I was running an M110 spring. The 2.0, I think I was right at, I want to say about 380 FPS, somewhere in there. Yeah, because I was still legal to go to one of the fields in here in Colorado that has a really low standard FPS for an outdoor. And that gun, while Sean and I, who's the owner of Valor, him and I, we spent probably 2 months just testing exactly what we're talking about here. Different weights across different platforms, basically seeing what happens with these guns. That gun was really weird because 2.5, which was our low standard, our AEG standard chrono weight at the field, was right at 1.5. But if I stepped up into something like a 0.32 gram BB, I would be sitting at 1.8 joules, which is DMR levels. I'd step into a 4.5, which is generally, sniper weight BBs. AEGs before wouldn't even have a chance to run it. This thing was shooting 2.2 joules.
Which is, I mean that's 2.2 joules. That's right under sniper ranges. I mean, that's 100-foot minimum engagement distance type stuff, at least the way that Kiowa ran it.
Yeah.
Well, and
go ahead.
no, what I was going to say is that, especially when you're talking about, when you're talking about joules, a lot of people don't really understand what a joule is. It's not really in the, the common everyday speak, especially, I mean, unless you're doing, stuff with engineering or, obviously scientific equations, but Airsoft, it is a thing. And, when you're talking about that Joule Creep, and I hate that term. Hey, I really do. I'm going to throw that out there. Like, I want to ban Joule Creep from any Airsoft conversation because it's not creep. It's increase. It's you're increasing the mass of an object, the BB, and ergo, you're going to increase the amount of kinetic energy that thing's going to slam into whatever it hits with.
Right.
And so it's not Joule Creep. It's not like this weird thing that happens. It's you are taking one half of an equation and increasing the numbers on it. You're going to increase the numbers on, unless you decrease the other half of it, you're going to increase the numbers of the final result.
Right.
And I think that's one thing that I really wanted to explain to people is that FPS is a really old measurement tool. And if all of us were still using 0.2 gram BBs or 0.25s, or but every airsofter, nobody was using a different BB weight, I think FPS could still be a viable measurement tool. But I think my problem is that it's not, and fields are still using it. And now fields are starting to ban certain systems on just because they don't understand how technology has advanced, and they're not on end of Airsoft like they should be.
Exactly. And that's hitting it right on the head there. Like, yeah, okay, some fields, they allow full auto on their field, so then they have to regulate rounds per second, which is understandable. It's not just HPA systems that can have high rate of fires. You could build AEGs with certain parts and upgrades and whatnot, and you could get them shooting faster than most HPA guns will.
Cameron.
Yeah, I mean, semi-auto finger seems shooting faster than most of my AEGs doing full auto.
Well, not only that, but I mean, the guy also builds his DS shoot 400 feet per second at 75 rounds a second. It's no wonder that guy trashes gearboxes left and right.
Right. He's still talking to me about having me build him one, but
oh god.
But yeah, I mean, back on subject, it's a general misunderstanding, I think, and you're talking about messing with the equation. You bring the weight up, but you don't drop the velocity down enough to really make a difference because you got to balance it.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is velocity, feet per second, doesn't necessarily mean length of travel. It really doesn't. I mean, feet per second, what you're looking for is that energy that BB is going to have as it's, cruising down the range, going for whatever, BB warrior you're trying to hit.
Right.
And
then, yeah, I can see that because I've seen quite a few platforms that are shooting, what would be classified as CQB or 1 joule. Prime example, his Vector. That thing was one of the slower shooting guns out on the field, but it had kept up range with what I'd call the big 0.5 joules.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then you've got the other way around, where you've got guns that are shooting right at rifleman limits that are outranging everything on the field.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I mean, look at the CZ Scorpion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I've seen quite a bit of those that have phenomenal range. My big complaint with them is ASG put a very key component as proprietary, but I'm not going to bag on that.
You know what, though? If it works, it works. I mean, you're looking at it from a tech perspective, and I can appreciate that because I look at plenty of stuff from that perspective as well. But no, and that's You don't need feet per second. And that's the thing, is that as systems have evolved and as we have really started entering into an age where most airsoft replicas now are getting insane range. I mean, out of the box, they're out of the box guns getting 225 feet, 250 feet. Yeah, you might have to arc the BB a little bit, but then you're talking 180-foot, flat, true, straight travel. That's insane. And much energy you're throwing at the person on the other end. And especially for fields and field insurance and things like that, you really want to be careful with exactly how hard you're shooting at someone. I mean, don't get me wrong, I trust my iPro, but you start cranking into some serious Joules hitting iPro, you're going to start damaging iPro.
Yeah.
Like with your gun, I mean, dude, what, 4.8 joules is what you said your sniper was at that one field?
Yeah, and that one field, maybe end to end was 100 yards, if that.
Oh.
So
you were hitting them with the full force of like a DMR by the.
Yeah, because that's one thing with going to heavier weight BBs, the energy's further, because it's not going to slow down as much and it's going to hit just as hard. That's where I think if fields do go to Joules, they should also you really should increase that minimum engagement if you're going to allow the specialty roles like DMR, even down to LMGs, which have DMR velocities or energy limits. But those are going full auto. If anything, those should be out at 100, 75, 100 feet if you're getting close to that max, because that's a lot of BBs coming in hot. Now, due to cost reasons, I don't see a whole lot of light machine gunners running heavyweight, but I'm not going to deny that I haven't. One of the milsim ops I went to a couple of years ago, we had 2 HPA LMGs on our squad. Both of us were using 3.6 BBs in the woods just to blow through cover and do our job.
Yeah. And so now that we're, you're talking about, different roles in general. How about the different platforms such as, AEG versus HPA? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I think it's highly unfair for energy in the BB just.
Well, other ones kind of fail in certain things. So, for example, you're using an HPA gun, unless you have an air stock, which you have to change your tank out because they're a smaller tank, you're going to be attached to a line, you're going to be less mobile. But again, coming down to just not understanding what a Joule is, it's not even necessarily the effect of increasing joules, increasing weight. It's more or less they don't understand how it works. That's my thoughts there. It kind of comes down to just some research. It's simple. It's simple math, I guess, is the best way to put it. And if you don't understand it, by all means, go step out in front of my gun at 100 yards, or not 100 yards, 100 feet, and I will prove the science to you right there. I hate to say it that way, but if somebody doesn't believe the chrono, but they want to know what their players are getting hit with, all right, we'll go by your standards. You go to my minimum engagement. I'll shoot you, and you'll realize where you're wrong. I mean, that's kind of a really blunt way to put it, but maybe it needs to happen.
Well, and that's the thing, is you can have an HPA that shoots and hits with the same force as a standard rifle. I mean, I can't tell you how many HPAs, especially at Kiowa, because of how you guys chronoed. Now, for everybody out there, one of the reasons I wanted to get into the differences between HPA and AEGs is because an HPA, again, so think about it this way, right? Think about like those little pool toys, okay? And it's where you like suck the water up in the cylinder and you push it out and you squirt the little squirt guns for pools. That's how an AEG works. It's never building up the maximum amount of pressure to a high joule. But what if your field chronos with, and you go, why are you chronoing me with that heavy BB? I don't use that much. It's because when you go down to your 0.36s or your 0.32s or whatever you're running through your AEG or HPA, sorry, it's going to lower that joule limit, and it's going to make it all that much more safer on the field for everybody else on the receiving end of your replica.
Yeah. And that's where, and I kind of made the determination we were going to chrono. We originally were going to chrono with the heaviest weight BB we could buy. and it ultimately came down to cost for that. But we bumped up from everybody chronos with a 3.2. That seems to be standard. If you bring an HPA gun onto a field that actually chronos them and chronos them semi right, even though they might still be an FPS, they still want you to chrono with a heavier weight BB. We stepped up to a 4.0 because we determined that the average HPA user won't use anything heavier than a 4.0. And then no matter, so that way any weight they use would be safe. If you're using a 3.2, the 3.6 is common enough that somebody could get a hold of it and be hurting somebody. That's kind of the
Mhm.
same reason why we stepped up from chronoing with what I'd call industry standard with a 2.0. We stepped up to a 2.5 because that
With your
was,
AEG platforms, right?
yes, with our
Yeah.
AEG platforms, we stepped up to a 2.5 because granted it is not as predominant, it is not as bad in the AEG world, but there is still that Joule increase effect. Um,
You didn't say it. You thought about it.
I thought about it, trying to think of what else to,
Well,
but
sorry, I was waiting for it and you didn't. I'm proud of you, Phil.
but the effect is still there. It's still prevalent. You never know what somebody's going to bring up when they come up to your chrono, but if you chrono with the average weight BB or in AEGs, or you chrono with a heavier than average weight BB with HPAs, you're going to still remain within those safe limits for the field. Now, granted, yes, Mr. Polar Star comes out and they chrono with ROs and they shoot 1.5 joules. They're not getting the full potential out of their mark or the replica. Sorry, I've worked too much with paintballs. I almost called it a marker. But anyways,
Traitor, traitor, traitor,
they
traitor.
yeah, yeah. Work for a paintball company that occasionally dabbles in airsoft.
Oh
So
God, yeah.
actually, I'm like one of four people in the entire company that knows about airsoft, other
Oh
than
God.
sells it.
Hmm.
So, um, anyways, you know, you're not getting the full potential out of your gun, no, but you're still going to be safe, and you're still going to be competitive. Is the big thing.
I would even. Okay, so they might. I'm going to throw this out there as an argument. Because again, I've been on the receiving end of plenty of A's that have had to follow those higher BB weight chrono rules. And okay, they might not be getting the potential out of their gun, but they are sure as hell beating the full potential out of mine. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sorry, dude. I've seen guys who come out there and they're able to run their HPAs right at the rifleman limit for heavy BBs. And then I get on the other end of those guys, and dude, they still outrange my stuff. I mean, my stuff is also broken and like half put together, but that's besides the point. I mean, there's still some dangerous territory or a lot of pissed off players, such as, entering, getting into like rates of fire and stupid hot FPSs. I mean,
yeah. I mean, if I were to completely open up, for example, my Mancraft, my sniper rifle, or my Scar, both of those systems are rated to take something like 215 psi or 250, something like that. It's about 18 bar is what they're rated for. The sniper rifle, if I were to run it at full pressure, I'd be well into 10 joules, if not more. But and then the Scar is sitting just below that.
right.
There's a lot more potential out of systems than what is really legal on the field. But
So,
and there's a phenomenon, I guess, kind of thinking about what you're saying. Mr. HPA is outranging or outperforming what your AEG is. A lot of what that is, and it is a phenomenon I experienced when I first stepped into HPA world, right? I was all happy. I got this brand new Polar Star Fusion engine. I'm going to drop it in my gun. I didn't change my hop up, bucking, and barrel, which I thought was still pretty good for what I was running as an electric gun. When I started shooting with the HPA system, I quickly realized that this wasn't the best that it could possibly be. I already spent the 400 or whatever, however much it was back then for the Fusion engine. So for me, swapping the parts and the barrel and the hop up and all that, the fine tuning bits, that after basically doing away with the gearbox part of it, um, then I was able to sit down and fine tune for 20 bucks here, 30 bucks here. I think the most I paid was $75 for a barrel because I heard it was the greatest barrel, and turned out it was pretty good. Not $75 worth, but
I have found very rarely an Airsoft is the price that you pay actually, that's a story for that's another live stream that I'll have to do one of these days.
yeah,
So,
you
well,
get what you pay for, and sometimes you don't.
well, very true. So we have covered FPS and why it's just an outment system. We have covered Joules and what they are as far as being able to calculate them, the velocity of the BB plus the mass behind it. And we have touched a little bit on, Joule Creep, as people call it. It's right down here in the title. So, but
Right.
for those that don't know, and like I said, we did touch on it a little bit, and I really want to explain to people what Joule Creep is. Okay. And again, I want to get rid of Joule Creep. It's just not a good name. It makes it sound mysterious, and it's not.
But
Joule
for
Creep.
a long time, it really was, and now that people are starting to pay attention and figure it out, now it makes sense. But
Hey, what's
when it
going
all
on, old fart airft? We got Zeb down there.
oh
Sorry, I've
no.
got a couple of screens opened up right now, so I can see the live chat and all that on YouTube. But no, and you're right, and it is, and the thing is too is it's been out for understanding how Joules work and understanding how these HA replicas work. There really is no excuse for, at the very least, field owners how to counteract Joule increase.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's just cover the bare bones basic. Okay, a Joule is velocity, calculated with the mass of whatever object you're slinging downrange. Okay. In this case, and so we're going to call that weight. All right. Your BB weight, mass, weight, everybody. Okay. 7 that's over. Now, when you start getting into really prevalent in, HPA systems, or I'm just going to call them compressor guns because they function the same way as an air compressor you would fill your car up with functions.
Right.
It's the same thing. So, an increase in joules happens when you leave the same volume of air and the same pressure of air behind that 6 millimeter sized object, but you increase the weight of the 6 millimeter sized object. Now, and you can run it through a chrono to check it. You can run it through just the mathematical equation, which I should find that while we're doing this, while you talk, and I'll kind of tell people what it is. But when you have an HPA, there's not a lot of places for that air to escape. So you are going to keep all of that volume and all of that pressure behind a heavier object now. And that's where you start getting into what everybody calls Joule creep, or as I'm going to call it, Joule increase, because that's what it is.
Right.
And so now that hopefully if people are checking this out and people kind of understand what causes different systems, which we've already kind of touched on a little bit by chronoing with higher weight BBs. But what are some other things you can think of to help counteract this whole, I don't even play with an HPA with an HPA. I don't have the money for it. I have the money for it, but I don't like that. But
have it.
Huh?
You refuse to run any of my guns that have an engine in it just to try it out.
No, I'm afraid to run other people's stuff. Really don't want to break it, dude. I don't think you understand. That voice in my head is louder than I am. So when you're talking about Joule increase, what are some things that you need to watch out for replicas? So as a field owner, how are you counteracting Joule increase?
The biggest thing, obviously, is chronoing in joules instead of FPS. I think all FPS should be used for anymore is in the tech shop. Kind of going back to one of your older videos with your little triangle of ideal FPS, the BB weight, and all of that.
Yeah. I need to redo that video. That was so poorly done. I really need to redo that.
As much as I send people to that to kind of understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But anyways, the biggest thing is BB weights, making sure that by your rule set, you're fair, but you're safe. Um, one thing there recently before the field shutdown that we did is we stepped up our DMR and our sniper rifles to 1.9 and 2.9. And people were like, "Oh my gosh, that sounds really bad." But really, all that is, if you were going to go back to the old FPS system,
Which
is
was
one
1.87 and 2.87, right?
or yeah, 2.87 or
Yeah, yeah.
2.89 or something like that. Either way, that point zero number FPS or joules is maybe only 1 or 2 FPS. But the biggest thing you could do to kind of battle and prevent injury, chrono with the average weight BB that your player uses. I mean, you should, if you sell BBs, you know what people are buying and you know what your average is going to be. Um, and then when you're going into your HPA guns, because it's more prevalent with a Joule increase, chrono with the heaviest BB that you sell, if not slightly higher. Because in that way, most players when they go out to a field, they buy BBs from their field. Not a lot of people go out of their way to buy a BB online unless it's heavy. So if you step up, I know HPA makes a really good 4.0 BB, and they offer the 4.0 BB chrono after speaking with the owner of the company, like, hey, this is what we do, and he was blown away that we actually took the time to go through each individual weight, what would be saved, what platform we use. I think we used every HPA system out there. We've used DMRs, we used LMGs. Like I said, we spent probably a good 2 months trying to figure out what is safe and how we can fight. Sean and I used to joke around, fight the creep. How can we fight this phenomenon that most people don't understand and still be, not completely nerfing everybody to a point where there's no way you're going to be able to run it without spending a lot of money and upgrades and stuff like that. Um, as far as the HPA stuff, tournament locks, fields need to understand and use tournament locks on regulators for HPA guns.
Yeah, that's something that, like, I've seen a lot of players come out to Kiowa. Sorry to interject for a second, but this, like, a lot of players came out to Kiowa and they would say, "Oh, field," and he said, "Well, I need to tournament lock your gun," and they go, "Oh, okay. Well, yeah, this other field doesn't usually do that," and they're like, and you're like, "Oh, how come?" They're like, "Oh, they don't know how." Field owners, field refs, field marshals don't know how to tourney lock an HPA gun to go out and play on the field. Sorry, I had to get out of my system. I can't accept that. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Exactly, and a fundamental flaw, I guess, is the best way to put it that I see. And I'm not gonna lie, the paintball world sees it a hell of a lot worse than what Airsoft does. But Airsoft field owners, managers, operators, they're there just for the money. They don't care about anything. They'll go by what they see as an industry standard, what they see printed online that all these other fields are doing. Um, there's actually a field that I worked for in Sterling that did the same thing. The field owner was just out there. He was there to make money, but he needed somebody to run it. And I got in there and I'm looking. It was a CQB field, 350 FPS, with a 2.0. That was all fine. Um, well, lo and behold, a couple weekends of gameplays. We're digging BBs out of people, trying to figure out what's going on. Like we had one guy from Wyoming had BBs stuck in his nose. He went home, took a shower, and it came rolling out, not knowing what was going on. So looking through it, that's when I started to really start to understand what a Joule was and how it affects airsoft. And I think if there needs to be, and I don't know exactly how to go about it, but there needs to be a broader education for airsoft fields or fields that allow airsoft to be a dual sport or just a airsoft only, where these owners who are there to make money, because that's just what a business owner is there to do. They
Well, that's
see,
what any
oh,
business is there to do, and you can't really fault them for that either, you know?
and then also like there's no real education for them. And I think if we can get major supply companies, um, i.e. Valken, Elite Force, Red Wolf, the main people that everybody buys from,
Yeah.
if like I'm sure you've seen it. You go to you see the Valken signs everywhere, like iPro here, Chrono here, that kind of stuff. I think that should be an offered package for those companies to be like, hey, read this. This is what could potentially happen, and I think that would help a lot. But that system, it kind of comes down to buyers are just going to buy what they're going to buy. They're going to run the field. As players too, we also need to be educated in it and not necessarily worried about. I don't know how to put that without sounding really bad, but there's a lot of airsoft players out there that is out there just to hurt people. Kind of
Well,
like
yeah, no, and I get there.
trying to think of the best way to word that. And there's also those that will do it without being intentional, like, oh well, hey, I get more range if I step up to this way to BB, and they go out and play whatever. But I don't know of a single HPA user out there that doesn't know the Joule creep or Joule increase effect, whatever we're going to call it from now on.
We got to get away from creep because that is such an ineffective term. I'm sorry. Like, the first time I heard Joule Creep, I was like, what? A Joule Creep? What does that mean? What is creep? And then when I looked into it, what is creep? And then when I looked into it, I was like, oh, you just mean Joule increase? Like, because I already knew about that stuff. Like, none of that was new to me. And people are like, oh, well, Joule Creep. And they're like, and it's so funny. It's like, so I watch a lot of YouTube and a lot of airsoft content throughout the week. And every time somebody gets into creep, everybody's like, oh, we're not going to talk about Joule Creep. We don't need to go into that mystical, magical. Guys, it's not mystical or magical at all. It's physics. And it's not even hard physics. It's your BB flies this fast. If you increase the weight of it, it's going to hit harder. Like literally, I was just Googling right here, FPS to Joules formula, which it seems to be specifically an airsoft thing. And one person was like, oh, if you have a gun that shoots 400 with a 0.2 and then you point, a point, for something in there, it's like, it's going to be this FPS, but your Joules doesn't change. No, that is so false. It's not even true. Like, that is so false. It's not even true, especially in an airsoft replica when you never know the amount of air that's right behind the BB.
Well, and also the piston acceleration too is a big key on it. That comes down to how quickly that volume of air is getting compressed and accelerated down the barrel. I think you hit it on the point last time I saw you at the field, or last time we had this conversation. The BB never, with an AEG, the BB is accelerating to a certain point in the barrel, and it takes that ramp up time to get to where there be, a simple slope. Whereas with an HPA gun, that's almost instant acceleration.
Well, and that's the one thing that a lot of people give me. Just a second. I need to send off a message. Okay. So those of you that don't know what we're talking about. Okay. So you have a piston, right? It's going to come back. Let's do it this way. So the piston in the AEG is going to come back like this. And this matters when you start talking. There's a big hole right there. It finally reaches that peak velocity and really picks up once it gets closer to the end of the. As you hit that trigger, is going to hard. And then it's going to maintain, and it's still probably going to have the same rate of drop off. But because it's already accelerated much faster and much harder, because it's
Newton's third law without getting real complicated in the numbers of physics and all this other stuff.
People, as soon as we go into physics, dude, I'm watching the viewers. As soon as we start going into physics and science, people are just like, nope, I'm out. All
right. I guess your viewership isn't as nerdy as I am, and I'll go in as like minute physics or that kind of stuff.
Oh, I love that stuff, dude. I love it. What?
Have you checked out Vsauce yet?
No, I need to. I really need to. I've been listening to a lot of Isaac Arthur for the last few days.
And if I can find the link, I will put a comment in the video. I'm not sure if it was Veritas or Vsauce, but they did a whole 2 videos. There's whoever did 2 videos on the Coriolis effect, or not the Coriolis, the Magnus effect. that affects airsofters more than they would ever believe.
But who's gonna go and look this stuff up other than you and I?
Right. Yeah, I know.
So
I posted that on my team's page, and I think that's still by far the worst performing post I've ever made.
well, so to round it off, and we did touch on this a little bit, but how do you chrono properly? How are you going to chrono properly? You're going to chrono properly by one FPS, because FPS is dangerous. FPS is a very dangerous measurement tool and just shouldn't be used anymore. The second thing is all fields should know what a joule is going to increase the same amount. So it's not like, oh, well, if 328 feet per second is 1 joule, then that means that 600 feet per second or 666 blah 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 feet per second is 2 joules. No, that is not how it works. No,
Not a linear graph. It's more of a bell curve.
Yeah, a linear graph. It's more of a joules.
Mm-hmm.
Which is still drastically less than 1 joule being at 128. But then from there, at 550 feet per second with a 0.2, you're at 2.8 joules.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard. It spikes. The faster you go, the harder it's going to hit quicker. So every field needs to understand what a joule is, how hard they're going to hit their players, and then they also need to understand how to chrono with joules. If you understand what a joule is, chronoing with a joule, you need to know how to keep your HPA guys out there from hurting all the AEG players. Because, like I said, I've been on the receiving end of plenty of HPAs, and outside of the sounds they make, hit me any different than an AEG does. No. If you know how to chrono them right. And then, obviously, if you, being you at home, are sitting there and you go, okay, I want your stuff. That take it on your shoulders, know what your stuff shoots, know how hard it hits.
Yep, that's ultimately it. Know your stuff, know your equipment. Did you ever find that equation? So if somebody have a chrono?
Yes, I do. Okay, so if somebody wants to know, all right, it's some super it. All right. It is going to be half the mass divided by 1,000 kilograms times the feet per second times the 0.3048 meters per second divided by 2 is, you can find the equation online. 328 feet per, just go to Google and be like FPS to meters conversion, and it'll bring up a thing, and then you just type up your FPS and you can run the math and you can know how hard your stuff is going to hit. But just know that numbers on a piece of paper isn't going to translate to the amount of air that's going to stay behind that BB if you want to run an HPA. Like I said, I don't even run HPAs, but I know the kind of money that people, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous that field owners are banning they're not holding themselves accountable to running a good field and to making sure that they're running a fair field for everybody.
Right. There's actually an even easier way. If you were to go onto Google, right, and you write FPS to Joule calculator, and you hit search, if last time I did it, it was like the top link took you to a website where somebody already has a little tool that you type in your numbers, and it gives you the numbers that you need to know. There's so many tools out there because there's people like that have the conversation out there. Like, well, what is what?
Here it is, airsoftmaster.com. Yeah, this is the website. I will I'm gonna copy this and leave this down in the description of this video after it gets done loading to YouTube.
Yeah, that's probably by far one of the best ones, because you can go either way. Meters per second to joules, which if you're trying to find a spring to match your gun, you can very roughly estimate. I would not count on it being exact, but you can roughly estimate.
It is pretty close depending on air seal. I mean, I had an extremely good air seal in my my Masada at one point in time where my fluctuations were only like plus or minus like 3 FPS, like plus 3 FPS. So I was like 395 to 398. And if you take an M120 spring, which will rate you out for about 395 feet per second, I think is what, or 300, and it's weird how it adds up. It's not perfect 400, but it is really close.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another useful bit for that tool, because as a tech, I get asked a lot, well, what spring do I need for this, or what spring I need to do? There's a lot of factors, but you can get ballpark close with that. And I always suggest, buy a spring above, buy the spring that it says, one below, and try it. If you don't want to go that route, send it to a tech and they can take the time and do that.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is you as the players, and that's why I wanted to do this is as more as an educational video. I'll probably do a discussion topic, maybe like by myself or something like that. Just really kind of hammering the science. I'll get a whiteboard and but essentially that's what people need to know is Joules are not scary. Joules is just when something hits you, it's just the measuring tape that we use to measure how hard that hit was. I've seen just the complete and utter disregard for player safety that fields have had. And I am not a fan of what they do. So me as a player, I'm going, okay, I definitely want to make sure that I never injure somebody out there on the field. And don't get me wrong, dude, I'm cool with big boy games. I'm cool to go shirts versus no shirts and everybody's running 500 foot per second. I'm good with that, right? What I'm not good with is impaling somebody with a BB and having to send them to the hospital to get it, removed by a professional because I wasn't paying attention. That's not a good day for any airsofter. And like I said, this is why I really wanted to do this discussion topic. And just, bring it to everybody's attention. This is what a Joule is. This is why FPS is bad, because FPS doesn't tell you how hard it hits. This is what you can do as a player to know, I use this weight of BB. I'm going to chrono it to this to make sure that my Joules are good with that B. Because then if you go down in weight, you're never going to hurt somebody. If you go up, now you have a problem. And yeah, that's really what this video was all about, was just a discussion topic to really let people know what's going on. And change is coming to the airsoft world in a really drastic way, especially with technology. Get on the forefront of it, know what you're working with, know what your, replicas are capable of, and know what to do to keep yourself and other players out there safe.
Yep, that's about the best you can do. And kind of going with what you're saying as far as you know, big boy games, and the difference, at least in my views, big boy games, you know what to expect. You know it's going to hit hard. You know what you're getting into. As a regular player or a younger player, somebody who's just going out to the field on the weekend, they know what they're going to expect, because they expect their field to follow a set standard and it's going to be safe. They know it's not going to hurt them and there's not a risk of getting hurt. Now it's up to the field to go by their standards, and that could be completely different subject. But if each player takes the time and makes sure that they know that everything that they're playing with is safe, they know their minimum engagements, they know if they have one, um, and they know what their rifle or pistol even is shooting, then you're not going to have as many problems, and it's going to be easier to grow the sport, bring in new players. Hey, this kid just bought or got one for Christmas or his birthday, and he wants to go out and try it. Um, Live stream I was watching the other night, I think it was Valken's live stream. This guy was playing in his backyard for a year, didn't even know there was such a thing as a field. And then he steps over to that, and oh my gosh, this really hurts. This hurts worse than what it did in my backyard. Well, why? Well, because the field didn't follow their standard. This person might just get rid of his equipment and never play again. Now, that didn't happen with the person that was on the live stream, but you don't we as players, we want to grow the sport, because if we don't bring new players in and we don't get them hooked the same way we are, we're not going to have a sport.
No, and that's what it adds up to. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I hate being that safety Nazi guy. I really do. But I know that if players leave, I'm not going to have anybody to play Airsoft with. And I would rather try to be a little bit of a safety Nazi and do the days than not have a sport. I'd rather have somebody to play Airsoft with than nobody to play Airsoft with, because at that point, I'm just shooting BBs wall in my basement and catching the ricochets.
Right.
So,
It's
all
more
right, man.
fun to people and not yourself.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Very true. All right, man. I'll give you a couple seconds to say shout out, do any shameless plugs that you want to do, and then we're gonna kill it.
All right, shameless plugs. Valor is still putting on Finder. We are still looking for a location. We should hopefully have that by the end of this week, the new location of Pathfinder. Tickets are available if you go to the Kiowa Creek Airsoft page. There is an event for Pathfinder. Tickets are there. Shout out to Sean and everybody affiliated with the Valor Airsoft crew after last weekend's events. Everybody's doing awesome to keep the momentum going forward and not let a community die. The field may be done, but the community isn't. Trying to think of what else. Old Fart, if he's still watching, I'm wondering why
He
he's not.
he bailed on us a while ago.
Oh, probably got too sciencey for him.
I don't know.
But yeah, I think that's about it. That's all I can think of.
Cool, man. Fantastic. Well, for everybody out there who hung in this long, yeah, we're right at about that hour mark, which is usually where I like to have these